Ninth Standard English, Unit 5, Prose, Water, the Elixir of Life, written by Sir C.V. Raman. So, this is a lesson about the water. So, this is a very big lesson, I think so. Okay. Man has, through the ages, sought in vain for imaginary elixir of life. The divine Amrita, a draught of which was thought to confer immortality. But the true elixir of life lies near our hands, for it is the commonest of all liquids, plain water. I remember one day standing on the line which separates the Libyan desert from the valley of the Nile in Egypt. One day, on one side was visible of a sea of billowing sand without a peak of green or a single living thing anywhere on it. On the other side lay one of the greatest, most fertile and densely populated areas to be found anywhere on the earth. Anywhere on the earth, teeming with life and vegetation. What made this wonderful difference? Why it is the water of the river Nile flowing down to the Mediterranean from its source a couple of thousands miles away. Geologists tell us that the entire soil of the Nile Valley is a creation of the river itself, brought down as the finest silt in its bloodwaters from the highlands of Abyssinia and from remote central Africa and laid down through the ages in the trough through which the Nile flows into the sea. Egypt, in fact, was made by its river. Its ancient civilization was created and is sustained by the life-giving waters which comes down year after year with unfailing regularities. I give this example and could give many others to emphasize that this common substance which we take for granted in our everyday life is the most potent and the most wonderful thing on the faces of our earth. It has played a role of vast significance in shaping the course of the earth's history and continues to play the leading role in the drama of life on the surface of our planet. There is nothing which adds so much to the beauty of the countryside as water, but it's just a little stream trickling over the rocks or a little pond by the wayside where the cattle quench their thirst of an evening. The rain-fed tanks that are so common in South India, alas, often so sadly neglected in their maintenance, are a cheering sight when they are full. They are, of course, shallow, but this is less evident since the water is silt laden and through the light bags and the bottom does not therefore show up. These tanks play a vital role in South India agriculture. Some of these tanks are surprisingly large and it is beautiful sight to see the sun rise or set over one of them. Water in a landscape may be compared to the eyes in human face. It reflects the mood of the heart, being bright and gay when the sun shines, turning to the dark and gloomy when the sky is overcast. One of the most remarkable facts about water is its power to carry silt or finely divided soil in suspension. This is the origin of the characteristic color of the water in rain-fed tanks. This color varies with the nature of the earth in the catchment area and is most vivid immediately after a fresh inflow flowing rain. Swiftly flowing water can carry fairly large and heavy particles. The finest particles, however, remain floating within the liquid in spite of their greater density and are carried to great distances. Such particles are, of course, extremely small, but their number is also great and incredibly large amounts of solid matter can be transported in this way. When silt-laden water mixes with the salt water of the sea, there is rapid precipitation of the suspended matter. This can be readily seen when one travels by steamer down a great river to the deep sea. The color of the water changes successively from the muddy red or brown of silt through varying shades of yellow and green, finally to the blue of the deep sea. That great tracts of land have been formed by the silt thus deposited is evident on an examination of the soil in alluvial soil areas. Such land, consisting as it does of finely divided matters, is usually very fertile. So, how does the water in rain-fed tanks gets its color? The flow of water has undoubtedly played a great part and uh, beneficent one in the geological process by where the soil of the earth's surface has been formed from the rocks of its crust. The same agency, however, under appropriate conditions, can also play a destructive part and wash away the soil, which is the foundation of all agriculture, and if allowed to proceed unchecked, can have the most disastrous effect on the life of the country. The problem of the soil erosion is one of serious import in various countries and especially in many parts of India. The conditions under which it occurs and measures by which it can be checked and deserving of the closest study. Soil erosion occurs in successive steps, the earliest of which may easily pass unnoticed. In the later stages, the cutting up and washing away of the earth is only too painfully apparent in the formation of deep gullies and ravines which make all agriculture impossible. Sudden burst of excessively heavy rain resulting in a large run of surplus water are the principal factors in causing soil erosion. Contributory causes are the slope of the land, removal of the natural protective coat of vegetations, the existence of roots along which the water can flow with rapidly gathering momentum, and the absence of any check of such flow. Incredibly, large quantities of precious soil can be washed away if such conditions exist, as is often the cause. The menace which soil erosion presents to the continuance of successful agriculture is an alarming one in many parts of India, calling urgently for attention and preventing action. The terracing of land, construction of bunds to check the flow of water, the practice of counter cultivation and planting of appropriate types of vegetation are amongst the measures that have been suggested. It is obvious that the aim should be check the flow of water at the earliest possible stage before it has acquired any appreciable momentum and correspondingly large destructive power. Water is the basis of all life. Every animal and plant contains a substantial proportion of free or combined water in its body, and no kind of physiological activities is possible in which the fluid does not play an essential part. Water is, of course, necessary for animal life, while moisture in the soil is equally imperative for the life and growth of plants and trees, though the quantity necessary varies enormously with the species. The conservation and utilization of water is thus fundamental for human welfare. Apart from artesian water, the ultimate source in all cases is rain or snowfall. Such of Indian agriculture depends on seasonal rainfall and is therefore very sensitive to any failure or irregularity of the same. The problems of soil erosion and of inadequate or irregular rainfall are closely connected with each other. It is clear that adoption of techniques preventing soil erosion would also help to conserve and keep the water where it is wanted, in other words, on and in the soil erosion, and such techniques therefore serve a double purpose. It is evident, however, that in a country having only a seasonal rainfall, an immense quantity of rainwater must necessarily run off the ground. The collection and utilization of this water was therefore of vital importance. Much of it flowed down into the streams and rivers and ultimately find its way to the sea. It is evident, however, that in a country having only a seasonal rainfall, an immense quantity of rainfall must necessarily run off the ground. The collection and utilization of this water is therefore of vital importance. Much it flows down into the stream, rivers, and ultimately find its way to the way to the sea. Incredibly, large quantities of the precious fluids are thus lost to the country. The, the harshness of our rivers, the waters of which now mostly run to waste, is a great national problem which must be considered and dealt with on no nationalist. Vast areas of land, which at present are mere scrub jungle, could be turned into fertile and prosperous country by courageous and well planned actions. Closely connected with the conservation of water supplies is the problem of afforestation, the systematic planting of suitable trees in every possible or even in impossible areas, and the development of what one can call civilized forest as distinguished from wild and untamed jungle is one of the most urgent needs of India. Such plantation would directly and indirectly prove a source of untold wealth to the country. They could check soil erosion and conserve the rainfall of the country from flowing away to the waste and could provide the necessary supplies of cheap fuel and thus render unnecessary the wasteful conservation of farmyard manure into the form of fuel. The measures necessary to control the movement of water and conserve the supplies of it can also conserve subsidiary purpose of value to the life of the countryside. By far, the cheapest form of internal transport in a country is by boats and bargages through canals and rivers. We hear much about programs of railways and roads construction, but far too little about the development of international waterways in India. Then again, the harnessing of water supplies usually also make possible the development of hydroelectric power. The availability of electric power would make a tremendous difference to the life of the countryside and enable rural economy to be improved in various directions. In one sense, water is the commonest of liquids. In other sense, it is the most uncommon of liquids with amazing properties which are responsible for its unique power of maintaining animal and plant life. The investigation of the nature and properties of water is therefore of the highest scientific interest and is far from an exhausted field of research. So now we'll see about the author. Sir Chandrasekhara Venkataraman. He is called as a C.V. Raman. 7th November 1888 21st to 21st November 1970 was an Indian physicist born in Tiruchirappalli. He carried out groundbreaking work in the field of light scattering, which earned him the 1930 Nobel Prizes for Physics. He discovered that when light traverses a transparent material, some of the deflected light changes wavelength. This phenomenon, subsequently known as Raman scattering, results from the Raman effect. To the commemorate it, February 28 is celebrated as National Science Day. In 1954, India honored him with his highest civilian award, the Bharat Ratna.